Good afternoon, folks. No, you were not listening. That would be good morning again, folks. Good. I'm really happy that Mesa set forth a set of issues because it leads right into what I believe will be a very interesting discussion. We have a panel over here talking about initiatives that they've all spawned, that they're engaged in, which really address some of the key issues that have come up in our discussions. When we think about bridging the educational divide, there's an issue that keeps getting skirted around, but which came up in the last discussion, was about language, for instance. How do you make sure language becomes a real barrier? And it's an interesting barrier because there's all this talk about the universality or I was going to say dominance, but I'm going to say some languages which are more tuned to some kinds of learning, but then there's the reality of learning. There's a project that we're involved in Haiti, for instance, where the significance of language in the local mother tongue becomes very, very pronounced when we're talking about active learning and STEM learning, for early childhood particularly. So language manifests itself in different ways as a barrier, as an important factor to consider when we think about the educational divide. There is, of course, all this other stuff, which I keep on referring to as systemic. I think it's an overused term, largely overused by me. But, it talks about the kinds of support, the scaffolding, financial arrangements. Mesa talked about scholarships, legal enablers we talk about. So the enablements other than the obvious ones, about scaffolding and support that really need to be in place in order that people can really take advantage of some of the opportunities. So that scaffolding, support, finance as a barrier, language as a barrier. There's another kind of, I'm going to call it a consideration, not a barrier. And this one is particularly interesting from MIT's context. You heard in Sanjay's presentation, you heard in the faculty panel discussion yesterday about the importance of first-hand experience, hands-on experience, the emphasis that MIT places on that kind of education, active learning, hands-on learning. In fact, even in all our initiatives, people say, "Oh, MIT technology." We say, well, no. It's a channel because what we really care about is active learning, deep face-to-face interaction and hands-on experiences. And one of the things that keeps coming up when we talk about online education, digital learning, blended education, is how do you make sure that the end-to-end experience, actually includes these kinds of practices that we really hold dear for high-quality education, first-hand experiences, hands-on experiences, and how do you provide it in environments, how do you provide it at scale in environments which present a lot of challenges, not just resource challenges, infrastructure challenges. So our panelists are really going to address some of these issues around language, issues around scaffolding and support, issues around hands-on experiences, and they're going to draw upon the significant initiatives that they are engaged in and hopefully identify some of the unique aspects of your initiatives that speak to some of these challenges. First of all, we have Nafez Dakkak, who's the COO, he reminds me, the Chief Operating Officer of EDRAC. Many of us in this business know about EDRAC. It's an online education effort of the Queen Rania Foundation, which aims to provide free, high-quality, online and blended education to Arabic speakers across the region. EDRAC is the first Arabic instance of the Open edX platform, which MIT and Harvard have developed. It reaches almost 500,000 registered Arabic-speaking learners across the region. EDRAC's learners come from all across the region, include disadvantaged youth in Gaza, Syria, and Iraq. Previously, Nafez was a strategy consultant with PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC's education practice, working with different governments across the GCC, focusing on education to employment transitions, another topic that's come up quite a bit yesterday. Nafez is a member of the World Economic Forum's global shaper community, attending the Global Agenda Council meeting in Dubai in 2012, its annual summit in Davos. He writes on education reform and technology in Arabic and in English publications. While he was at Yale, he completed a year-long award-winning thesis on the obstacles towards curriculum reform in the Middle East, an issue that was raised towards the end of the last presentation. Using Jordan and the UAE as case studies, of which the Dubai School of Government published an executive. He recently completed a 6-week fellowship with New America in Washington, D.C., working on the crossroads of Islamic education and Arab identity after the 2011 revolutions. Following that, we have two folks, and it's a joint presentation. We have two folks from Kiran. Vincent Zimmer is the managing director and co-founder of Kiran, a social startup whose mission is to eliminate barriers for refugees to access higher education. What they do is they don't charge any tuition fee and allow enrollment based on performance. Previously, Vincent, and you heard him come up with a lot of questions the last 2 days, was supporting students in crisis regions via the NGO Study Without Borders, which provides scholarships to these students. Since 2009, he's a scholar of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation, and since 2015, a scholar of Social Impact Lab Berlin, powered by SAP. He's a fellow of the Ludwig Erhard Foundation since 2014 and was awarded several prizes for social impact by the AKB Foundation. I'm sure he'll explain what it is. He was selected as responsible leader of the BMW Foundation. I know what that is. BMW Foundation in 2015, and was listed in Forbes 30 under 30 in 2015. He has a master's in economics from Göttingen University and a master's in public policy from London School of Economics. He's currently a PhD student at Göttingen University. HIla. HIla Azadzoy is the head of academics at Kiran Open Higher Education. Again, and I've told you about Kiran, what they do. As the head of academics, HIla is responsible for the continuous development of Kiran's academic programs, strategic partnerships, and fundraising activities. She has an MSc in politics, economics, and philosophy from the University of Hamburg. She launched her career at Human Rights Watch and has over 5 years' experience as a professional translator, working extensively with refugees. As an active member of the NGO Visions for Children, HIla has a profound understanding of human rights. She has conducted internships at the European Parliament and the Berlin International Cooperation Agency. She is an enthusiastic professional with a broad-based proven experience in higher education, and I love this term, digitalization. Last but not least, we have my friend, colleague, Ramji Raghaven, who's the founder and chairman of Agastya International Foundation, and he'll be talking about the wonderful lab and hands-on experiences that their foundation has enabled. Agastya is the world's largest hands-on mobile science education program for economically disadvantaged children and rural teachers to support and transform primary and secondary education in India. It operates with a fleet of 133 mobile labs, 48 science centers, 59 lab on bikes, and a 173-acre campus, a creativity lab near Bangalore, or Bengaluru as it's called now. It has impacted over 6 million economically disadvantaged children and about 200,000 rural school teachers through creative hands-on science education. Their Tech Lab Bike project was one of 4 winners of the Google Global Impact Award in 2013. Ramji, Mr. Raghaven, has served as a member of the Prime Minister's National Knowledge Commission, board member of Vigyan Prasad, New Delhi, the Karnataka State Innovation Council, and the Executive Council member of Visvesvaraya Industrial and Technological Museum. In 2009, he was elected as a senior fellow by Ashoka Innovators for the Public, and 2011, he was conferred the People's Hero Award by the CII, which is the Confederation of Indian Industry, not A. Mr. Raghaven has an MBA from the London Business School and a postgraduate diploma in development studies from International Institute for Social Studies, Netherlands. He's an alumnus of Delhi University and a school that certainly Sanjay and I know very well, the Rishi Valley School. So we have this very illustrious panel, and we are going from right to left here as you share your work on your initiatives.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, perfect, thank you. Thank you, Professor Vijay. Thank you, the ODL and everybody at MIT for this great opportunity. And hopefully this sort of comes all together in the end, because sort of I think Mesa did a very good job of sort of mentioning some of the stuff that I'm going to mention, so I actually won't spend too much time on it. Ali is from Yemen. Ali is in his early 20s. Due to the ongoing situation over there, over the past, I want to say almost 2 years, Ali has been unable to continue his university education properly. But what he has been able to do through his perseverance, the generosity of others, and obviously an online connection, is take 7 online courses, of which he's completed 3, and according to him, they've helped him maintain and find some freelance employment opportunities while he maintains or goes through his situation. Sireen is a couple of years younger than Ali. Sireen is from Lebanon and had to drop out of university after her freshman year because she had her first child. Now that her child is a year and a half old, she's getting back into education by taking some online courses. The reason I start by sharing these stories is before we go into sort of some of the larger statistics and some of the mind-numbing statistics when we talk about the refugee crisis, when we talk about these crises, we forget that behind each and every number is a very singular and personal story to a lot of people. When you look at the Middle East, when you look at the Arab world specifically, there's been around a 4-fold increase in demand for higher education over the past 40 years. To put that a bit more into perspective, that's around 4 countries across the region alone added around 300,000 new pupils to their education system every single year from 2010 to 2015. To, again, just put some of these numbers further into context, and I hope I did the math right, this is MIT, assuming a class size of around 25, that's 12,000 new classrooms, 330 new buildings that hypothetically, and obviously it doesn't work out exactly like this, that you need to build to just keep up with the current levels of education. Of course, as Mesa aptly mentioned, it's not just about putting people in sort of brick and mortar classrooms, it's also about the quality of education that people are receiving. And unfortunately, across sort of the Middle East, none of our universities have been able to reach into sort of the top 100 or even top 200 in terms of lists of universities around the world. And it's not just, of course, research and education, it's also some more utilitarian function of helping people transition into employment. And unfortunately, in many countries across the Arab world, unemployment is actually positively correlated to higher education. Of course, what do you do when you're unemployed? You spend a lot of time online, or as we call it in the US, fun employment. Fortunately, online connectivity in the Middle East is increasing at around 20% per annum. We're at around 135, 138 million users right now. In less than 5 years, that number will double. Most of youth today believe that the internet will play a big role in helping them achieve their education and employment opportunities. And perhaps, as has become common knowledge at this point, the #1 country in YouTube consumption per capita globally is Saudi Arabia. There is a catch to all of this, though. It's that while many of these youth, many of the people in the Middle East and the Arab world can access the internet, can go online, only 3% of the internet right now is in Arabic. The English Proficiency Index from Education First puts the Middle East as the worst or weakest region in the world in terms of Arabic competence. To move a little further with this, and obviously there are no silver bullets in education, that's something I always try to drive, but there seems to be sort of a small missing piece of the puzzle that we can look at here. So enter MOOCs in Arabic. And obviously most of us, if not all of us here, are very, very familiar with the MOOC movement that launched in around maybe 2013, I guess debatable, but pretty much in North America, started by Coursera, edX, Udacity, and all these people. As Professor Vijay mentioned in his introduction, this is where Idrak comes in. Idrak is the first instance in Arabic of Open edX. We launched in May 2014 under the Queen Rania Foundation, under Her Majesty's patronage, with partnerships with several entities like edX, MITx, and HarvardX. And to date, we've reached over 600,000 learners across the Middle East, a number that's growing, in terms of registrations at least, at 1,000 to 2,000 learners a day. Around 8% of those have completed courses, so 50,000. And the number of courses continues to grow. At around 38 courses today, hoping to hit around 100 courses in the next, I want to say, year and a half. Of course, none of this would have been possible without a hardly or incredibly hardworking team of 22 people back at home. To give you some perspective on the demographics, around half of our learners have a bachelor's degree or in university. The other half basically don't. The other half either have a high school education or some sort of associate's degree. 1 out of 3 learners on Idrak comes from Egypt, which tends to be representative of the overall breakdown in the region. Other learners come from Jordan, Algeria, pretty much everywhere in the region. Notably, learners from Saudi Arabia complete more courses than anybody else as a percentage. And whereas only 40% of the learners on the platform are female, they complete, again, double the number of courses than their male counterparts. None of this would have been possible without a lot of support from content partners everywhere here in Cambridge, but also back in the Arab world, including the American University of Beirut, the German Jordan University, and a lot of other partners I'm not going to spend too much time on. I'd love to say that this was a piece of cake, but over the past 3 years, one of the first things I learned, and it's what they tell you when you start anything, ideas are great, but execution is pretty much everything. And execution tends to be pretty hard. So the first challenge, of course, if you want to deliver something online, is getting people online, giving them access to the internet. So while there is a lot of promise and a lot of people already online, the reality is there are still around 200 million people across the Middle East that don't have access to the internet. And this is something we can talk about more perhaps in the Q&A, but we're already looking at some solutions in terms of whitelisting the website, in terms of offering local access versions of Idrak in different places. Once, of course, you've connected people online, I've touched upon this a bit, there's a challenge of actually finding high quality Arabic content. And there isn't a lot of it out there. So we've been working and relying on a lot of partners, the generic sort of a lot of people specifically in the diaspora to really create some of this content and put it online. And it's been incredible seeing people that aren't necessarily able to come back to actually give back very actively and proactively. One of the unexpected challenges that perhaps we had as a team, and one of the lessons was to really just make no assumptions, was that for a lot of people learning in Arabic online, this was really learning online for the first time. And being connected doesn't necessarily, they use the internet like I guess we would normally assume so. Most of the people online, their experience of the internet is really Facebook and WhatsApp. So till today, we send somebody a verification email to their inbox, we get complaints via Facebook saying there's nothing in my Facebook inbox. So that learning process, especially for young millennials, is still there. I'll touch quickly on the last 2 points. One is sort of pedagogy, and the second is talent. In terms of pedagogy, we do believe, we're trying to push the envelope as much as we can, but there's still a long way to go in really using the technology in ways that really find new pedagogies beyond just delivering video online. And in terms of talent, starting anything takes an incredible team. And unlike perhaps places like Cambridge or Silicon Valley, talent in the Middle East tends to be quite scarce and rare, and sort of a chicken and egg problem because we're trying to create that talent as well. So now I have a confession to make. For a little over a year, perhaps a year and a half, there's been a lot of interest from a lot of people, both externally and even internally within the team, about seeing how can we use Idrak, how can we see sort of MOOCs and online education tackle or support with the refugee education crisis. I've been one of the more critical voices in our team trying to push back on this, not because I didn't believe or didn't want to help, because our mission at Idrak will always be to revolutionize the access and delivery to high quality education in Arabic or to Arabic speakers. But I was just skeptical about us, trying to follow the hype or follow the money, as they say, and sort of veer from our mission. To use an analogy, and I've seen this movie 3 times, so if you have any questions about it, do let me know. To use an analogy from the financial sector, I am sometimes concerned that a lot of these securities, a lot of these courses that we're putting out there have a lot of dubious underlying assets or dubious underlying learning segments that nobody is really checking. And I was personally sort of very worried about sort of doing that and making false promises to refugees and not being able to fulfill that promise. Because you can take, and this is a problem we mentioned, you can take an unaccredited online course and put it on your resume, because we do believe that employers are more forward-thinking and are already starting to accredit or accept some of our courses in the application process, and we have some data on that. But when it comes to refugee, if you don't have the right to work in Jordan, if you don't have the right to work in Lebanon, what does it matter if you take the course? Of course, none of this in the end really mattered. Around a year ago, we started getting several emails from workers in the refugee camps, asking us to either pause our courses or extend the deadlines or etc. because refugees were already taking the courses. It seems obvious at this point, but what we thought, the courses are out there, they're free, they're online, and refugees are actually able to access them. So it is really upon us to try to improve that experience and try to meet them where they are. At this point, there are probably around 2,000 people that we've tracked who've taken courses through different partners and again, this is in sort of a blended learning setting. Obviously, there are a lot of other people, perhaps in refugee camps, that have taken the courses. We've sort of done, I want to say, sort of a more focused blended learning program with around 600 of them, with sort of, again, thanks to a lot of partners in the Norwegian Refugee Council and CARE International, up north in Jordan in 3 of the camps, Zatari, Azraq, and the EJC, around some of the employability, teacher training, child mental health, and conversational English courses. We've taken around 90% of those, and we've done sort of some focus groups with them. Almost all of them would definitely take the course again. 70% of them really enjoyed the online learning experience and allowed them to repeat the content. And again, it's a lot of the benefits that we already talk about. And this is perhaps where we can dig more on the Q&A. The number one reason all of them cited taking these courses is they wanted to improve their basic skills for finding work, which obviously is not easily found in a refugee camp. There are other challenges to taking these courses. One is the inability to work from home, and this is not because they don't have internet, primarily because there's a shortage of electricity supply. And this is particularly relevant to sort of our female learners who had to spend more time at home due to a lot of sort of domestic and child rearing responsibilities. A lot of them felt pressed for time, which which I guess encouraged us or showed us that we should create separate instances for the refugee population so they can take the courses pretty much or as much as possible in a self-paced manner. And I guess the third part, and this is something I touched upon briefly, is, again, a lot of them have smartphones, they use WhatsApp, they use Facebook, but they've never learned online. And what we found is you need around 2 to 3 sessions, or 2 to 3, I want to say 30-minute sessions of spending time with them, teaching them how to create an email, use it to sign up, really building some of that digital media literacy, which we've talked about yesterday. So the way we see it, there are 3 parts of this refugee education challenge that need to be tackled separately, but maybe perhaps also holistically together. The first one is actually providing access to the content, whether that's in face-to-face settings, in sort of some of the libraries that people at the Media Lab talked about yesterday, or through an online connection. The second is what was in Arabic just now, is actually making sure the content is relevant to them. And the reason I go back to the Arabic slide is it sometimes gets a bit frustrating and confusing to us when very sort of good-willing or efforts with goodwill and I guess well-intentioned end up delivering content to refugees in languages they don't speak. And this has been, in our experience, primarily at the K-12 level, but also something we need to be wary about sort of at the higher education level. At the end of the day, if you really want to educate people, they need to understand what they're learning. And the last part, which is, at least in our experience, been the hardest part to solve right now because it's sort of very policy-driven, governments tend to move very slow, is around sort of the credentials and recognition. And this is the currency of the certificate, whether it's to complete a course, whether it's to find employment, or other aims or goals that the learners might have. And there is a point and a caveat here to say that we have realized that at the end of the day, whether sort of we have some qualms about this or not, education is about hope. Education is about hope that tomorrow can be better than today, and for a lot of these refugees, that is really meaningful. And it's very important, but we still need to see how can we go beyond just delivering that hope. I might sound a bit maybe pessimistic or not optimistic about this, so I want to emphasize that I do think that there's an incredible opportunity here. Not just an opportunity to deliver, temporary education to refugees. This is an opportunity, and to take a page out of Professor Christensen at the Harvard Business School's book, to target non-consumers in a way where you could really reinvent education from the ground up. You have refugees that have spent 2, now 3 years out of school. What do? Do you tell them that they've just missed 2 or 3 years out of their life? Or do you try to recreate education in a way where they can cover the 12 years of sort of K-12 education or the 4 years of university in less time? I mean, we all know that when we talk about a 4-year education, pretty much random decision made by somebody at Harvard in 1500s. There's no necessarily sort of scientific reason to do university education in 4 years. And if I can take a K-12 education and do it in 8 years for refugees that are non-consumers that will settle for something that's more experimental, What happens when I start moving up the value chain and suddenly completely reinvent education? So I go from saying education takes 12 years up to high school, to it takes 10 years to 6 years, to, oh, what do people do with all the extra time? And I think that's a much more interesting problem to solve eventually. And we're already seeing how our MOOCs and sort of how online education can start tackling regional problems in much more meaningful ways. One of them, and for you guys that don't know, this is Cairo right before the morning rush hits. Barring a couple of cities, perhaps in China and India, traffic in Cairo is horrendous. And one of the main things that people, when we've talked to university, I don't want to say faculty and professors in Cairo, is they ask us, how can you help students and make sure they don't have to come in for the 9 or 8 a.m. lecture because it's a 2 or 3 hour commute? How can they just take that course or watch that lecture from home, maybe participate a bit in the online discussion, and then come later on in the day or in different components to participate in the classroom? So we are already working on some efforts, and I said I'd get to this. I just want to mention them briefly. So since 2015, we've been trying and incredibly failing. So if people want to learn how to not do this correctly, please talk to me after this. We've been trying to offer local access or sort of and this has been collaboration. Some people at the sort of MIT and edX, to be fair, and it's been an open source project, put edX on a box. Take a local access, sort of a local access server, take a server, and put edX or idrak on it in a way where people can connect to it offline, and then you connect that on a sort of relatively regular basis to online, to the internet, and regularly update their databases. We obviously also realize you have a relatively small team, and one of the beauties of online education is you have a lot of really, really good data that you need to analyze. So in the next, I would say 4 to 5 weeks, we will be open sourcing, de-identified, IRB approved, pretty much all our data sets. And there'll be sort of different levels of access that you need to apply to get for, but we're very, very excited about collaborating with people that have the data science capabilities to look at the data and try to tell us what we're doing wrong, what we can do better, and how can we learn more about how people in the developing world learn online. Last but not least, we're also trying to create some content that's more relevant to refugees. We're working with the University of Geneva on a resilience training MOOC developed from the perspective and viewpoint of refugees in both Arabic and English. I'll end with a question. How many of you know where they were at around 10:30 a.m. Eastern time on the 11th of February 2011? Nobody? Not surprised. I will never forget where I was. I was in French class my senior year of college, and I realized I'm dating myself a bit. And I was glued to my phone waiting for the news on Twitter that Hosni Mubarak would step down. Obviously, a lot of the optimism and excitement that surrounded the region around the beginning of the Arab Spring has, disappeared is an understatement. But going back to my French class and thinking of Albert Camus, one of sort of the French thinkers or novelists, and I'm paraphrasing here and I'm not saying it in French, to believe in the human condition is to be a fool. To despair in the human condition is to be a coward. At Idrak, we pretty much wake up every day and decide we'd rather be fools. Because as sort of a great leader one time said, in one of the darkest times perhaps of American history, the best way to predict the future is to create it. And that's what we're trying to do, and we hope that you will join us on this journey. Thank you.
We'll keep questions and all for the end, after the thing. I do want to take issue with dating yourself by being in, being in high school in 2011. Makes me feel young, really.
Thank you very much. My name is Vincent Zimmer. I'm the co-founder and managing director of Chiron. It's actually also the first time that we have invited with 2 people to the panel, so thank you very much. We will split up the presentation a bit, that HIla is going to answer the questions based on our academic program. I will try to give you a glimpse on what we're doing. And as we learned yesterday, after like roughly 50 minutes, people start mind-wandering. So I see that's now the time. So I would like to actively invite you to do that now. And in order to do so, I would like to close your laptop just for a minute and your smartphone just for 1 minute. And maybe close your eyes, 5 seconds. I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to picture your home. In my case, that's a hotel room, but maybe you have a nicer option. And I want you to imagine the 3 most important things that you would take with you if you would have to leave that home forever. Maybe unsure where you're going. 3 seconds, 3 things. And now please open your eyes again now and raise your hand if you have thought of your high school diploma. I constantly ask this question among higher education people. Still fascinating. When my grandfather was put into this situation in 1944, he also chose a warm jacket, some money, and some food. And he thought that's actually the better option. And this became a problem when he tried to enter higher education, because he was lacking legal documents to prove that he's actually able to go there. That's a bit loud. Maybe turn it down. He also faced some other challenges. He was lacking financial resources to pay for university. He was lacking the information how the system in general works. And the universities actually were lacking the capacity to invite him in to start his studies. And surprisingly now, we rediscovered in the Cuban refugee crisis that this problem hasn't gone away. In fact, it increased. The refugee numbers since 1945 every year are increasing, topping up now to more than 60 million people, which is roughly leaving behind 5 million people who actually have the potential to access higher education. And this is known, this is based on studies everyone should be actually aware of, but the question is, why should we care? And the moment when I start caring was the moment when I meet Oday. Oday is a young man from Syria. He was an architecture student for 2 years. And I meet him in Istanbul. I was doing research there, but part of my PhD. And I thought he was an international student. And we had very nice conversations. We went to cafes and we explored the city together. And at a certain point, he told me, you know what, I'm actually a refugee. Actually, since 2 years, I'm doing nothing because I cannot leave the country, I cannot start working, and I can also not finish my education. And then I started getting angry because I thought, wait a minute, this is exactly the problems my grandfather told me about. The same 4 major challenges. Since 60 years, nothing has changed. And that was the moment when I thought, why is not anyone doing something about this? Why is not the UN stepping up? Why is not, I don't know, there's so many big companies, so many big universities. Why is not someone taking action to tackle that challenge? And the result of this anger and this thought was Kiran. Kiran is based on the blended learning model. And the basic idea behind was there are so many resources, especially here produced at MIT, at Harvard, with all the folks from edX. There are so many initiatives going on. And so we thought the solution might be just to connect the solutions already available with the people who are in need. And the core product that came out is a blended learning model where we combine MOOCs that are freely available into digital curricula and link them with regional universities. I think you all are aware of the advantages and disadvantages of blended learning or of online learning in general. But what we created here was a perspective for students who they can enter a process, doesn't matter where they are, without legal documents, without capacity reductions, without any costs like linked to financial resources, and then give them the chance, based on performance, to follow that path and enter higher education, enter a university. Again, this is not enough. You're all aware of the disadvantages of blended learning. For me, this was a new field. So in the beginning, we thought, okay, we just give them access to education, and then they will solve the problem by themselves. Turns out, it doesn't work that way. So what we started introducing were services of social interaction to help the people succeed. The most important one is the buddy and the mentor program, so that each single student in our program has a one-on-one person who you can talk to and who's going to with this program. On top of that, we have mentors who are a bit more experienced, both in terms of study and also of corporate mentoring. So to give the people a perspective, so what I actually do with this education, what is the purpose, what is the outcome, what is the long life benefit from it. And of course, we also needed to address psychological problems. Many people have gone through traumatic experience. Some of these traumas kicking in years after they have happened. So we introduced psychological support. The language gap was already introduced in the beginning. So our program is based to 80% on English courses. However, if we want to actively integrate refugees into a hosting society, they need to learn the language, both of the regional university, but also just to communicate, to find their way around, to find an apartment, to find friends. So what we do is we combine it with the possibility to learn individualized the language of the hosting countries. For the first 2 courses, this works pretty well with Duolingo and Bubble, and then we channel them into university courses to bring them up to C1. Again, we also heard the challenge, this is not enough. So then we got the challenge, okay, people need internet access, they need hardware access, and so on and so on. So we started building up study hubs, independently run by Chiron, but also run by partners. So for example, our partner universities open their libraries. Actually, we got the feedback, our own students don't go anymore to the libraries. They took everything online, they even rarely show up to the lectures. So we have this huge and amazing buildings and no one is using them, so we're very happy to open them for refugees. And then we got another feedback. So our students started studying, we started making surveys, and so we asked them, so why are you doing this? What is the purpose? What is the outcome? What is your goal? And most of them told us we want to have a job, because I have 3 sisters at home. I have a father, I have a mother, I have the family to support. And most of them left everything behind when they especially seek the better fortune in Germany. So we realized that getting a job is crucial for these people to stay motivated and to focus on education. And of course, we want this to happening because you can really easily bring them into jobs like, I don't know, for gardening or for repairing stuff, but we all know that education pays off on the long term. So what we did, we had the educational program and we introduced employability program besides, consisting of corporate mentoring, consisting of an internship at a partner company, but most of all, consisting of a model where companies actually actively offer jobs as a secure base at the end of the academic program. Why is this working? Probably all aware of, again, this is a very known fact that we have a demographic problem, especially in countries like Germany, like the US, actually all over the Western world. So we have actually a high demand for skilled labor force. But always the problem is that they don't trust migrants. They say, are they really educated? Are they really able to integrate? Do they speak the language? And so on. And through our process, we can actually guarantee this to our partner companies. We can say they will speak the language because they have passed the C1 language test. You can trust in their education because they will actually receive degrees from your national university. And you can try it out. You can get to know the people behind. 30% of all jobs are given through networks, through private contacts. So getting to know the people reduces the fear of strangers dramatically. So who are we actually doing all this? We have been founded in Berlin in 2015, a bit more than a year ago. And I think there was this window of opportunity in Germany that allowed us to grow very rapidly during the last year. So we're a small team of 35 employees, but supported by a much larger network of roughly around 650 volunteers who dedicate roughly around 20 hours per week to us. And a lot of them are professors, a lot of them are university presidents, a lot of our partners are universities, of course. So we have roughly working with 200 universities worldwide, most of them in Europe, but also in Turkey and in Jordan. 18 of them have introduced the academic model as I described it already. HIla can go into detail. It sounds pretty easy. Yeah, you have MOOCs and you integrate them into the degree program. All of you know this is not easy. If you have more questions on that, we can follow on that later. And I will maybe come to an end. I think you know what I'm going to say. Because what motivates us and what keeps us going, what also convinces people on the other hand, is that for the first time, higher education has, I think, explored this problem. And that people get in contact with people who have this problem. And the nice thing about this thing is that it's a game changer for higher education in total, both in Germany and in Europe. Because when we introduced blended learning and MOOCs and digital education in general, it was a very nice, fascinating technology, and many people get excited about us, but many people also refuse to use it. And now for the first time, they see a problem and see digital learning as a solution, and they understand the problem. That's why they do it. That's why we have been very actively convincing professors, faculties, universities who before they did not even have a single MOOC in their own institution, but they're now suddenly willing to accepting 60, 70 MOOCs of being integrated into their education system. And we're also making a huge process with the national governments, with the EU Commission, to introducing now legal frameworks of actually developing something like a digital Erasmus. And I think this is something we could all learn from on how to actually convince people to use technology, not about describing the advantages and the fascinating details of the technology, but actually by finding really real problems. And the real problems, I mean like not theoretical ones, but individuals, persons you can go to and talk to and say, would this actually help you? And one of these persons is Kashif. He's one of our engineering students. He's originally from Pakistan. His village was raided by the Taliban, and he started studying engineering with us. And it turns out that he actually wanted to work at BMW, which is always a nice story when you're in Germany. Many people like that. But during his studies, he actually discovered that he has another talent, because his grandfather was a politician in Pakistan. And so he's actually full of these very inspiring quotes. You can just wake up in the night and he has a quote for you, so dramatically. And he's actually now working for the state secretary of the economic ministry in Germany. And now when you go onto his Facebook timeline, you see all the time pictures popping up from the German Bundestag, from the European Commission, where he actually now, for the first time, these people meeting, they talk about the refugee crisis all the time. But for many of them, it's the first time they actually meeting a refugee. I mean, not by going to a camp, saying hello, and then leaving. I mean, actually meeting a person. And this is maybe also something to learn again, because I know there's a lot of fear also in the US and in many other countries of not taking in refugees. But I can just describe from the German perspective that it was actually a catalyst for our whole society. So we changed the way our ministry works. We changed the way our university works. Actually, all parts of our society. And I think this is a very great chance. Many, and hopefully all of us, can learn from. And of course, I'm hoping that you will take this message back to your universities, back to your home countries, and maybe spreading the news that refugees is not a problem. Actually, it's a chance for all of us. Thank you very much.
Did you want to?
I was told that we
right at the time.
have questions in the end now. We actually reserved some time now, so you can shoot questions at us, and HIla is going to answer them. I don't know if we
can wait till the end for the questions. That's fine. Do you have any comments to add to the?
I think I will do that in the FN.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
So back in 1998, I found a very interesting book in my father's garage in Bangalore, India. And the book was a compilation of letters between the famous management guru, Peter Drucker, and a Japanese gentleman who was then known as the Sam Walton of Japan, a big retail industrialist. And they talk about various aspects of Western creativity and Japanese creativity and so on. And in one of the letters, Drucker says, you know, Japan's progress is attributed to the famous Meiji Restoration. Now, I was a student of economic history, and back in the 1860s, a young guy called Meiji took over Japan and brought a lot of very enlightened people who decided we must transform Japan or we'll be taken over by the Americans, right? So it was a massive transformation, an enlightened transformation in the governance of Japan. That's the conventional wisdom that I grew up with. But Drucker said something very interesting. He said, what most people don't realize is that a century before Meiji, there was a group called the Bunjin, the literati of Japan, who were very influenced by Chinese culture and so on. And the Bunjin went around spreading the equivalent of modern education across Japanese society. Medicine, mathematics, origami, and so on. So he said, as luck would have it, when Meiji decided that we needed positive governance, the people of Japan were ready for it. They were very absorbent. So when you had the positive policies executed, you had a tremendous response, and it was a double positive. And that's really the secret of Japan's success. And it made me think and wonder that really the central challenge of education, the central challenge of development, is how do you increase the absorptive capacity of a society? So how do you do that? It seems like a monstrous task, you know. Not every country is going to have a Meiji and the Bunjin. And over the years, working with Agastya, I came to the conclusion that the answer lies with a humble toy like this. Okay? It's called the tippy top. And I'm in MIT, so I won't explain the science of it. You know, I'm a humble MBA, so I just BS my way through. But I think Sanjay already referred to it when he talked about angular momentum and so on. So when you put it on a surface, it sits on its bottom because that's where its weight is, its center of gravity is, right? But if you spin it, incredibly, it tips over and starts spinning on its stem, right? Very counterintuitive, almost beautiful because it's so unexpected. And the first thing you do is you go, when you see something like this, simple, unexpected, counterintuitive, what do? You go, ah. See a beautiful painting, you could go, ah. Or a big hall in MIT and go, ah, whatever. And the ah is very important because in the ah, your mind is awakened, your curiosity is stirred, right? And then you wonder, now, why did that happen? How did it happen? Could it have happened differently? What if? And so on. And if you do find out, and by the way, this one's not trivial. There's a picture on the internet of Wolfgang Pauli staring at the tippy top, and you can see from his expression he's wondering why it happens. Okay? So if you do find out, fill in the blanks, you experience the famous aha effect. So ah and aha are profound ways of learning. And then, of course, you must have fun doing what you're doing. And that's the famous ha-ha effect. So I said, look, really what you need to do to disseminate crazily across society, and possibly this is what the Bunyan were doing, is the spirit of ah, aha, and ha-ha. If you can do that really effectively, through any means possible, you're going to bring about a transformation in society. You're going to increase the absorptive capacity of society. The other day in our campus, we have a lovely 172-acre campus that we call our Creativity Lab. I invited one of our alumni, a young girl called Monica, to come and talk about how our foundation had impacted her, if any, and to our staff. And Monica said, you know, I was a hopeless student. I was getting like 20% in school. Totally demotivated, not interested in studying. And one day I was persuaded to visit your campus, and the teacher there showed me how you figure out blood groups. So he pricked my finger, literally she went, ah, and showed her what blood group she belonged to. And she said, that experience was transformative. Suddenly I realized there's a whole world out there, call it science or whatever, of discovery, of something unexpected, new, and possibly relevant. And from that day forward, she began to come to our campus more often, experienced a lot of really transformative hands-on experiences. Her grades began to shoot up. In fact, she topped her school. Her parents wanted to marry her off from a very poor rural background. And she said, look, if I do well in my studies, if I top, will you postpone my marriage and allow me to go to university? And that was the deal she struck with her father. Sure enough, she topped her school, ended up in university, became the leader of 3,000 kids in a positive way, and now is a proud graduate, and for whatever reason, she wants to come and work with us as a teacher. So a great example of the power of ah, aha, ha, ha, right? It can transform your life. So when I was a young boy, I had a dream of building a school in the foothills of the Himalayas. And I said, you know, this school would produce creative leaders who would come out and change India, possibly the world. But the years went by, I became a soulless banker, lived in New York, London, and then in the late 1990s, I decided to go back to India and see if I could make my dream happen. So I got a group of people together, students, scientists, people from industry, and asked them the question, is it possible to raise the level of an ocean? Right? Can you raise the speed limit of creativity of a country? Or is that a contradiction in terms? And that led to another question. What makes you creative or innovative or a great problem solver? Is it in your genes or a skill that you can learn? And we said, look, you know, creative people, great problem solvers, tend to be great observers. They observe things, simple things, that most of us really don't, for whatever reason. There's a whole literature on that. There's a process of awareness, of discovery and experimentation. They have the capacity to associate different strands of apparently unconnected information, and then the ability to apply it to produce something of value to society. So we said these are the sorts of qualities they have, and all of this is on the foundation of curiosity. If you're not curious, you're not going to observe or be aware, and so on and so forth. So the mission of our foundation should be to spark curiosity, nurture creativity, and importantly, instill confidence. Because if you're not motivated, if you don't believe you can do something, then where's the question of being curious or bringing it to life? So we said this is going to be the mission of our foundation, and let's go and anchor it on a beautiful campus. We bought 172 acres of land, and that was the good news, a huge coup. I couldn't even get 1.7 acres of land today in India. It's become such a precious thing. But anyway, that was the good news. The bad news was we ran out of money. So what do? We huddled and we said, look, while we wait for the money to build the buildings for children and teachers to come to our campus and stimulate them, let's take education out to the villages. How do we do it? How about a mobile science lab? So we came up with a trunk full of very low-cost, ingenious science experiments, trained our tractor driver to be the first science instructor and set him loose in the villages. A few weeks went by and he said it's having a magical effect. So I said, keep doing it till we come up with a better idea or more money. Anyway, the mobile lab attracted a lot of attention in the press and media. Money began to come into the foundation. Today we have 150 mobile science vans crisscrossing the countryside all across India, reaching over 1 million kids and teachers face-to-face in very powerful ways. And we have labs on motorcycles because they're even more accessible, something called a lab in a box, and stationary fixed science centers, about 50, 60 of them, so it's a hub and spoke model. And the campus over the years has grown into a really unique center for hands-on experiential learning in science, the arts, music, ecology. It was completely barren. We've regenerated that, and there's lots of learnings from the ecological regeneration of the campus. So that's where we're at today, nearly 1,000 people, about 700-800 teachers who go around spreading the spirit of I hope, and that's another challenge. So what are some of the lessons that I've learned? One is that creative learning may be an option for the rich and well-off, but it's absolutely essential for the poor because they face immense challenges. So you've got to be creative, you've got to be a problem solver to come out of the trap of poverty. The second thing is that education is much easier than re-education, right? So catch them young. And finally, a la Monica and hundreds of other stories like hers, transformation actually is not that difficult. What you need for transformation and transformation at scale is to create environments, hands-on, experiential, creative environments, leverage the power of information technology, absolutely, to allow children and teachers and adults to experiment, to discover, to be curious in a relatively fearless environment. So those are some of our learnings. Going forward, we want to use the power of digital information technology to actually enrich what we're doing through perhaps blended learning or hybrid modes of learning. We want to be very careful that we don't destroy sort of the precious thing we have created in terms of hands-on learning. So what Sanjay was talking about yesterday was really interesting to me because where is it that digital learning can really make that difference in terms of practice, retrieval, interleaving, spacing, and so on, and where hands-on learning makes the difference. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater because something is very popular or fashionable. Find a way of keeping what really adds value to your system and ways of enhancing that. So those are some of our challenges, intellectual as well as people. And having said that, I will now pass you on to a short film. They're actually 2 back-to-back films of about 3 minutes each. So over to the gentleman behind the projector. Thank you.
Make me curious.
Maybe he doesn't take orders from me, Vijay. It's you.
Where the 3 southern states of Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, just a 2-hour drive from the city of Bangalore, Agastya International Foundation occupies a 172-acre campus. This campus is the main hub for mobile labs that take lessons in science, math, ecology and art to village schools and communities. In the midst of rural India, Agastya's campus provides a hands-on science museum for children which has one rule: please touch, challenging young minds, sharpening motor skills and drawing on familiar stories. At one end of the spectrum are the durable, elaborate models used in the Discovery Centre and carried to science fairs. At the other end are low-cost experiments and models that can be easily and inexpensively replicated. Scientists who come to instruct teachers and conduct research on the Agastya campus have freedom to experiment with their own methods of teaching and to share the knowledge acquired over their illustrious careers. Teachers from rural areas rub elbows with some of the great scientific minds of India. While scientists, artists and other visitors instruct the teachers and children, some of the children are also selected for the Young Instructor Leader program. Children are selected to be young instructors when they show special interest and skill. Agastya also reaches communities through science fairs which come into town with all the excitement of a travelling circus. For a few days, young instructors demonstrate low-cost experiments and elaborate models to children from the local schools. Integrated learning, art, dance, as well as science and math are taught on the campus. This engages the child's mind and body so that science and math come alive in new and different ways. Mobile labs visit rural villages after dark and whole families gather at a central location, often illuminated only by the lanterns the vans carry. Communities learn about the importance of ecology, the value of Ayurvedic plants, and other lessons useful in their lives. As the spirit of Agastya spreads throughout the country and around the world, it is bringing the rural poor to the table as India makes her mark on the global scene.
It creates a real flutter wherever it goes. And it's got very high reach. It has a disadvantage, it's mobile. So that's one of the things we face. So that's why we created these fixed centers combined with these mobile labs to have a hub and spoke model. But the iMobile lab funded by Dell is very interesting because we've got these hands-on lab-in-a-box kits, and then we've got lessons on the computer, and we have access to the internet. So it's a kind of hybrid thing. And we'd be happy to send you some details on that to see if you can launch it in the country that you're working in.
Thank you.
Sure. So basically, the way we've been approaching this, and we'd love to learn from more people, is sort of threefold. Sort of starting at literally sort of the bottom of the pyramid, people don't have devices, don't have access to anything. We've ended up relying in the camps and outside the camps on different sort of foundations. Perhaps one example I can use is Bibliothèques Sans Frontières, Libraries Without Borders, has this whole idea of ideas box where they've been setting up in camps in different places, both in the Middle East and I want to say sort of in Western Africa, or across Western Africa, where they set up, there's internet connectivity, and you work with these partners to allow sort of blended learning sessions for people to come in and reach the courses. Moving a bit up the value chain, assuming people have their own devices, we've been experimenting with this idea of creating sort of a local access version of Idrak or edX on sort of a local server. And Wikipedia has had some relative success with this, with their Cubitrix and sort of other elements. And that has had relative, it's getting better now, but to be honest, that's sort of been very difficult. The sort of easiest thing for us for now, and that's sort of moving one step further, assuming people have a phone and have some sort of SIM card attached to it, we've been able to zero rate or sort of whitelist Idrak within Jordan, at least on with one of the telecom providers on sort of an experimental basis. So basically, if you have data service, it's just completely for free. Everything on Idrak is completely for free. The challenge, and this is for somebody just trying to implement on Open edX, is edX automatically just hosts everything on YouTube. You obviously cannot do that. You can't whitelist YouTube. It just doesn't work. It would be too expensive. So what we've done is just put everything on sort of an Amazon sort of S3 box. Once the app is live, and edX recently released an app which we're airbizing, it'll also be much easier to even airbize that because everything is already sort of on a separate server. Does that make sense?
It helps a lot. Thank you very much.
Philip Schmidt from the Media Lab. So first of all, thank you for the presentations. 3 really incredible, although very different projects. My question is about, so first of all, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the pedagogy and the actual academics in Chiron, because you guys reserved the time to talk about that. So, and then connected to that, it strikes me that there are 2 pretty different ideas of learning and pedagogy represented here between the example from India, which I thought was terrific, curiosity, creativity, confidence, I think, all those things, and the very hands-on approach. And then the, much more traditional course-based kind of delivery of videos and content in the first 2 examples. So I'd love to hear kind of even you guys talk a little bit about how are they different, or how could they be combined, and what are the values of one or the other?
Just to piggyback on Philip's thing, to put it there, and you don't have to answer it right away, but if you were to work together, how would you collectively make a difference, is what I wanted to hear.
Yeah, so maybe, I think you can hear me all. Talking about our pedagogy and our didactic model, how it is constructed, and also since what Vincent already addressed was actually aiming for recognition. So how do we get there from basically having a set of courses, but coming to the fact that universities that are not even producing these courses are recognizing these for credit. So what we essentially do is that not just focusing on right away on the individual content of each respective course, is structuring a curricula. And then for that, we also are basically in a traditional model of designing modules, where we basically identify the learning outcomes that we contrast with the learning outcomes of the program of the partner university. So the overall aim is not to just contrast content, but identify the learning outcomes and therefore the competencies that the people would acquire by doing these modules essentially, and then to really see, okay, these are the skills that people can acquire through a combination of blended learning. So what we also do is not only structure the existing courses within those modules, but also add on live courses or live tutorial sessions. So we basically have an asynchronous element of the MOOC, but also adding to that a synchronic element where we have interactive sessions where the students and the tutors really talk about the different content. And that is the one hand. So we have that, what Vincent also already said in the course, in the form of a study hub, so where people can meet offline, but also digitally having basically a virtual classroom in addition to the MOOCs.
Actually, for the classroom experience, we looked at your peer-to-peer idea,
yes,
and actually copied that and try to implement it on the ground. Maybe quickly then throwing the ball back in terms of how we can bring this together, like formalized learning and creativity. I think MOOCs is not the end. So what we're working on at the moment is developing new ways of learning path. So because in the past it was very linear, like you have a book, a lecture, and you have exam. And with MOOCs you have now the possibility to have multi-level passes, so you can have an exam, and then if you perform good, you take another pass, rather if you perform badly, but it's still linear. And what we try to achieve or hope to achieve in the future is there's two ways. First of all, introducing virtual reality in terms of online learning, but also introducing artificial intelligence. That meaning you can define the goal where you want to go, and then the path is built in front of you. So that would mean a truly individualized learning path. And then you again have the possibility to experiment and introduce creativity experiments, like hands-on experience, not just watching videos, but actually doing something in the virtual ground.
Yeah, I mean, this is a discussion I've been having with Vijay as well, that we are very open to ideas. And I'm sure there's a lot of synergy, because, see, what are we trying to do? What we're saying is, look, fundamentally, critical life skills have to do with curiosity and hopefully creativity and your own confidence, right? These are almost psychological, behavioral traits, non-cognitive skills. And that if we can awaken them, then the same people will respond differently to the same stimulus. So for instance, if you went with a computer to somebody who had been awakened in terms of curiosity, creativity, and the internet, they're going to use it perhaps differently than somebody who just views it as, passively. In fact, I saw this about 10 years ago in schools in India, where they distributed computers all over the place. And the Prime Minister's scientific advisor asked me to go and have a look to see what's going on. And what I found was a lot of these kids were using computers to learn what they call skills, PowerPoint, Word, and Excel, right? Because they thought that could get them a good job in a BPO. Now, nothing wrong with that. When you're desperate, you need a job, you need income. But they were really not thinking. And there wasn't enough teacher intermediation. So the power of the computer and the net was really diminished in the sense it was being used much less optimally than it could be. So how do you meld the two together? Blend them, I think, is a big challenge. There are lots of areas of synergy, but not to minimize, and I've, in my old age, come to believe that the most important thing is humanity, okay? And I think two of the people yesterday, Christine and Cindy, referred to it, mind, heart, and hand and heart. And Christine talked very peripherally about the intersection of technology and humanity. With this obsession with skills and employment, and all of that is terribly important, I don't deny that, we shouldn't lose our humanity. So that's very important.
Yeah?
You mentioned the 650 volunteers that are highly trained. Many people in the United States, including myself, want to do more than just give donations to NGOs to help refugees. What opportunities are there for volunteers in the United States to do more? For volunteers, could you tell us more about your program for them?
Actually, we have roughly around 100 volunteers based in the US here. Actually, we have an local spot here in Boston, so you could just join the team right away.
Okay.
And I think the two main avenues are, first of all, we are digital projects, so we obviously need a lot of programmers and coders. But our mentor and our buddy program, both working on an offline and online base. So if you're interested, for example, also as a lecturer to join and give tutorials, to give a direct academic course, or to help students to find their way along in the course.
Right.
We're looking for this kind of people.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Anna from Siberian Federal University once again, and my question is to all of you, whoever wants to answer. It's in terms of digital education. We all know that one of the most important thing about digital education is social presence. And in terms of that, my question is there, what do you do with collaboration? And by collaboration, I mean like different levels, class to class, teacher to teacher, even maybe participating in some international projects, I mean, for education, because it really encourages creativity, it really encourages education in general, so it really, you know, sometimes help to, so it can help basically fit many of the goals. So do you have some thought of this?
I'll go first. I would say that what we try to do is from a very early stage on that we're engaging heavily with the partner universities, that it's not just an aspect that we basically prepare the students and then they transfer successfully to the partner university, but also even before that have actively integrated the students before. It actually does not matter so much whether they then transfer to that specific university, but just being in a university setting, having contact to students, to lecturers, that is very important to actually really show, okay, this is what offline campus looks like, and you have a specific pathway of how you can get there, and basically as soon as you fulfill the requirements, you can leave the pathway of the digital way and then fully transfer and apply to the partner university to have that from an early stage on. And as Vincent already mentioned, also have the university level, basically that aspect of integration, but apart from that, also connecting with professionals. So you always have the perspective on what is actually coming afterwards. And I think that's the perspective of having that, and just the feeling of, okay, I'm on a track, I have a specific pathway, just as the MIT does with the MicroMasters. I think that's very relevant specifically for the group that we're addressing.
Last week, I was with a young man, Po Shen. He coaches the US Math Olympiad team. And he showed me a product for which he's trying to fundraise on a smartphone on how to learn math, right? And he's built it up very systematically. But he's created an algorithm. It's a bit like Uber, learning math through the Uber approach. So if there's a problem, there are half a dozen people who've answered the problem, and they rate how well the problem has been answered. The other thing is, here I am looking at a problem. It'll tell you that there is somebody across the corridor who's actually part of the system who is available and can teach you the answer to that problem, or across the street or wherever, so depending on where you are. So it's very much peer-to-peer, teacher to teacher, teacher to student, all on a smartphone. And this is part of what he calls, there's a foundation called the Spirit of Ramanujan, to try and identify undiscovered geniuses around the world. So they're trying to look for, they keep increasing the scale of the difficulty of the problem, and see people coming in from all over the world to answer these problems, and then, you know, hopefully they find a genius. But it seemed like very much a social presence thing, and he's coming to India in July. We have a summit, and we're going to see how we can use that in an Indian language for India.
That's a terrific story. We're going to take two more questions, but Ramji's comment just triggered a memory which I think. So MIT, when we came in, and Cease will remember, we had this very large project called Project Athena, which was looking at distributed computing for education. And one of the features on Athena, and this preceded things like Instant Messenger, Netscape, etc., was Zephyr. there was a chat box that used to show up, and I'm talking about the early 90s, and I don't know if Cease might know if it was there earlier, but the fact is, if you ever had a question, you could pop a question, and this box would show up, and anybody who was on the HIla network would respond. And some of the trails that this would take, not just in terms of a community responding to that question, but it would take different branches of interest. And just, in fact, a colleague of ours, Greg Jackson, who was my predecessor here at MIT, has written some wonderful stories about this. It's incredible, that power of a peer, in both addressing problems, taking it to different directions. In fact, when we talk about our initiative in India, we struggled a lot with what we should call it, and eventually we called it the Connected Learning Initiative, because we want to draw upon the power of peer-to-peer, vertically, horizontally, as my co-PI, Padma, in India will say. It's not just about students talking to each other in the same grades, but vertical and horizontal communication that goes on, and to be able to leverage the power of that. Ishi.
The work you're doing, it's incredible. I was curious to know if other countries want to replicate your model. Can you share your thoughts on the level of difficulty? I'm also interested in knowing your thoughts on the business aspects, such as sustainability, finance, marketing, and so on.
Is this for all of us?
Ramji is this thing?
Mostly for Ramji.
Yeah, our model is scalable and replicable. Perhaps not easy as a digital model, because it's physical. You need the vehicle, you got to train the people, you got to traverse distances and so on and so forth. So clearly there's a lot more friction in that sort of model than there would be in their model. But having said that, for a physical hands-on model, it's very replicable, because the teachers whom we use to teach and engage the children are all from local villages and so you don't need MIT graduates to do it, right? In fact, MIT graduates would refuse to do it. You have to be out in the heat and dust 6 days a week. So you can easily train people. We have a peer-to-peer model where children teach children. You saw that girl on the film. So that's highly replicable. The science is pretty much culture neutral, right? Because we all experience the physics and chemistry and the science of day-to-day living. So there's nothing particular to any culture. So it's highly replicable. What you need is, I guess you need the energy and desire to do it. And that's the absorption factor. We talk about curiosity and creativity here, but it's a very select group. I don't think most people really appreciate the value. They're looking for basic skills and a job. So you need partners who are willing to do that. We've got some requests from Nigeria and a few other countries. In fact, even in the US, somebody said, why don't you take your mobile labs to the Native American Indian reservations? Now, that's an interesting lateral thought. An Indian helping an American Indian, finally coming together. An Indian American and an American Indian.
I can see Columbus turning in his grave.
Correct. So that's a dream project of mine, but I need some people here who have got that spirit to say, let's make it happen. In terms of sustainability, everyone says this, we live on a knife edge. We have to raise money every year. It's a public charitable trust, and it's not good, especially at my age. I could have a heart attack just trying to. And yesterday I was very worried, and I got a call from India saying the government has just signed this massive MOU. And I said, phew, thank God, right? So that's not a good way to live, but that keeps you young, and that's the way it is. But what is sustainability is not how long Agastya Foundation lasts.
Yeah.
It's about sustainable change only happens when you change minds.
That's it.
Right? So if what you're doing, the ha, penetrates minds, and they begin to live a different life and spread that word, then that is the nirvana of sustainability. Not about how can you ensure that you have a revenue model that's going to keep you going for 15, 20 years, which is the MBA approach, right? So that's the way I see sustainability, in terms of your idea and how it takes root. Has that happened? No, but maybe it will. That's what I'm sort of aiming at, triggering curiosity at a massive scale.
Thank you. Our last question, and before, not to embarrass Admir over here, I have to tell you.
Actually, it's not a question. You want to say something?
But I'm sure it's a comment. But
right.
I have to tell you in the context of this discussion, it's very nice to see you over here. But about 6 months ago, I got, I'm going to say, accosted on the corridors, hallways over here, and saying, Vijay, I'm edX this, I'm from Syria and I've done this. And what are we doing for refugee education? So, so it's particularly interesting to see you over here.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I would like to address here with a comment, and I would like to say and really acknowledge the importance of your work. And I'm saying this because I'm a new faculty member here at the Civil and Environmental Engineering. And 20 years ago, even more, oh my God, I was like deciding what to do in my life, to find a job and support my family, or to bet on education. And with my mom, we went to a first school in Croatia. At that time, I was a refugee from Bosnia in Croatia. And entered the first school and said, my mom said he should start the school. He decided to, not work, but get education. And the director of the school said, actually, you cannot start here, because even though you're good, your grades are, I brought my certificate with, so I managed to actually prove that I was good. But he said, you cannot start, because actually laws are not allowing Bosnian refugees to start high school in Croatia. And that was really a big issue. I mean, it was kind of really the key step in my life that actually turned out to be an incredible experience, because the director said, wait a second, I don't give that word about the laws, and you come on Monday and start with the high school. Mm-hmm. And so because of his decision to actually take me in that high school, that was actually, I had two options. There was chemistry, technical school, or transportation. So I could choose between these two things. And I said, okay, let's do chemistry, because it sounds kind of interesting. And there is a refinery in my old town, because I was thinking to go back to Bosnia at that point. There was a refinery of oil, so chemistry should be, useful. And there, actually, my trip started and ended here at MIT. And what I wanted to say, and the importance of your initiatives, is actually to break those barriers between segregation, discrimination, of a single person that made his decision of if I should enroll into a school or not. Mm. And so this is a huge opportunity that we could do together to actually say, okay, let's just get rid of those decision makers and give education to maybe new faculty at MIT. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.